It was a time of great change, the Industrial Revolution. From the 1760s to the 1840s, everything we knew shifted under the weight of progress. Factories rose like titans, steam engines roared to life, and entire towns swelled with workers. I remember it well, though my bones are old now. Back then, I was just a young man trying to make sense of this new world. People were split. Some embraced the machines, others feared them, and the newspapers reflected the growing divide. I grew up in a small village where life was simple. My father was a blacksmith, and I was set to follow in his footsteps. We worked with our hands, making horseshoes and farming tools. The air was filled with the familiar scent of iron and smoke. Life was steady, predictable, until the machines came. People in the village were wary of the changes they heard about in the towns. Some said the machines were taking jobs, and others believed they'd bring prosperity. My father scoffed, saying we'd always need the forge. News spread quickly about a new mill being built in the neighboring town. The papers talked about industrial miracles, how steam power would change everything. They said the machines could make cloth faster than any weaver. My father dismissed it, but I was curious. I wanted to see it for myself, to understand how a machine could do what skilled hands had done for centuries. I wasn't content to stay in the forge, not when the world was moving forward. Others in the village gossiped about it too, some excited by the promise of jobs, others whispering that these machines would steal their livelihoods. I remember walking into the mill for the first time. The noise was deafening, clattering gears, hissing steam, and the constant hum of work. The machines were massive, and the people working them seemed no more than cogs in a greater engine. I found work there, at first just sweeping floors, but soon I was manning the machines myself. The newspapers called it progress, but inside the mill it felt like something else entirely. I saw the faces of the workers, their expressions numb. Some spoke of the old days with nostalgia, when work was personal, when a man took pride in his craft. Working in the mill wasn't easy. The shifts were long and the conditions harsh. I missed the freedom of the forge, but I couldn't deny the speed at which the machines produced. What once took days now took hours. People outside the mill seemed divided. The rich praised the factories, the new wealth it created. But in the pubs, people muttered about the dangerous conditions, the accidents that went unreported. I adapted, learning the rhythms of the machines, the way they needed constant care. One day, there was a fire. Nothing huge, but enough to scare us. Word spread quickly. By the next morning, the local paper was talking about it, but in a way that made it sound like a minor incident. We knew the truth. These mills were a tinderbox waiting for a spark. I became efficient, one of the best at operating the looms. My pay increased, and for a time it felt like progress. The machines were the future, and I was part of it. I could finally afford more than just the basics, new clothes, even small luxuries. But even as I climbed the ladder, I saw the reality. Children as young as 10 were working the same dangerous machines. One boy lost 2 fingers, and the owner didn't even flinch. That was the price of progress. Meanwhile, the rumblings outside grew louder. The working class was beginning to speak out against the factory owners. They called for better conditions, shorter hours. People in the streets were protesting, and pamphlets circulated, calling the factory owners tyrants who cared more about their machines than the men and children who operated them. But with every gain, there was a cost. The air in the mill was thick with dust, and many of us developed a persistent cough. I began to lose weight, my energy drained from the relentless hours. The mills churned out goods faster than ever, but at what cost? Workers in other towns had begun striking, demanding fair treatment. I read the papers with growing interest as more factories shut down due to strikes. Meanwhile, those of us who stayed behind were expected to pick up the slack. One winter, a flu swept through the mill, and many of the workers didn't survive. We were replaceable. I realized then that the machines didn't care about us. We were expendable, just as replaceable as the parts in the gears. I eventually left the mill, returning to the forge with a newfound appreciation for the simple life. I even helped my father build steam-powered tools for our workshop, bringing a small piece of the revolution with me. It was quieter there, more familiar. The newspapers continued to talk of progress, of industry expanding and new factories being built, but I no longer believed in the promises of wealth and prosperity. I had seen the cost firsthand. The steam engine helped us work faster, but on our terms, not the factories. I didn't miss the mill. I missed the people I had met there, but not the life. Now I sit by the fire, an old man, watching the world spin faster and faster. The machines may have made life easier in some ways, but they also made us forget the value of time, of patience. The younger generation looks to the future as I once did, but I can't help but smile. In the end, progress is a wheel. It spins, but it always comes back around. And so the lesson I learned, sometimes moving forward too fast means leaving something important behind. We can build all the machines we want, but we must never forget we're more than the gears we turn. And the newspapers today, they speak of automation, new revolutions in industry. I suppose it's true what they say. History repeats itself.